If you listen to Armstrong live recordings from 66, 67, it's really kind of hit or miss. He's pretty erratic. And then, of course, if you listen to him after the 2 bouts in intensive care, again, there's some TV appearances which are pretty rough around 70, 71. But 68, that's like a magical year. All of a sudden, the stars aligned. He was feeling good. He was feeling healthy. He had worked on his embouchure, and his trumpet playing was really up, and his band had been with him for a number of years. They knew the show, they knew how to support him, they gave him just what he wanted. And as 1968 progresses, if you listen to the Disney album or some of his TV appearances, the What a Wonderful World album, you see him getting stronger and stronger, and then it kind of hits this crescendo in London. All of a sudden, everything is hitting on all cylinders. He can hit the high notes at the end of Indiana, on A Kiss to Build a Dream On. I mean, a lot of people, they love that song. It's just kind of a nice little pop tune. Joe Muraney, the clarinet player in my band, told me that was kind of Lewis's signal. When he called A Kiss to Build a Dream On, that means his chops were up. He was feeling good, he was feeling strong. And I think you listen to that London recording, I mean, you would not know he's 3 years away from death. I think that 1968 concert represented to him kind of like a climax of sorts. Like, this is what I was all about. This is my whole career. I mean, Ole Miss, the instrumental, that was the first song Kid Ory, the trombonist, remembered hearing Armstrong play in 1916. So it's like, it's got the New Orleans roots, but then it's like, look at this, What a Wonderful World. I've got a #1 hit, and I'm almost 70. And so if you want an album, a concert that just spans his entire career, I think he looked back at that night, and it's why he kept copying it. It's why he kept sending it out. He knew his entire discography was great. He was his biggest fan. There's no way around it. But at the same time, this one concert, I think, represented a culmination. Like, this is it. This is everything I'd built up to in one night. I love it. You're going to love it too. Listen to it. In the 1950s, Armstrong made hundreds of reel-to-reel tapes. He had kind of slowed down as the 60s went on, but Lucille Armstrong, in an effort to kind of convince Armstrong to stay home, redid his entire den and put in brand new Tandberg tape decks. And so Lewis starts making these tapes. He gets to about reel 26, 27. He's got this recording that the BBC sent him of these shows. And it was not even a year old, but all of a sudden there he was, playing great, singing great, the band sounded great, and he falls in love with these recordings. He copies it to one tape, copies it to the next tape, he has friends over, he plays it for them, then he starts making copies for the band and sending it to the other musicians in the All-Stars, saying, listen to this is the most relaxed thing we've ever done. And he's so proud of these recordings. On one of the boxes, he actually writes For the Fans. And so by 1970, Armstrong is back to, he's no longer doing 300 nights a year, but he's got the clearance from the doctor. He's performing again. He is going on TV. He's playing a little bit of trumpet, but he had been recording for Brunswick Records, and he had convinced Brunswick Records to put out some of this BBC stuff from London. And so they asked him to pick the tracks. And so he got to select 9 selections, and it was the only album that was ever released that was produced by Louis Armstrong. During the 1950s, when Armstrong began getting referred to as an ambassador of goodwill, and people still ask us, was that an official government title? No, but I think it speaks volumes to how he was received overseas. I mean, he would go to Europe, Japan, Africa. He would go to countries where they didn't understand a word he was singing or a word he was saying, but he would show up, and just the spirit, the warmth, what he communicated with his music, with his trumpet playing, you didn't need to understand a word of it. It was the international language. And I think that's why when you watch footage, Edward R. Murrow made a documentary, Satchmo the Great. You see Armstrong getting off the airplanes in Switzerland and in Africa. And there's it's like looking at the Beatles. There's mobs, thousands of people waiting for his airplanes to come in. And that international appeal has not died down for a moment. Today, the Louis Armstrong House Museum, we get international visitors every day. People who didn't see Louis Armstrong, but their parents might have seen Louis Armstrong. And in their home, he was a symbol. So we have tourists who land at LaGuardia Airport, get in a cab, take me to the Louis Armstrong Museum, and they show up and they drop their luggage and they just start crying. And the first image you see in the new Louis Armstrong Center is Louis and Lucille with the Great Sphinx of Giza. And we kind of wanted to make that point that this is a global ambassador. This is a guy who was beloved around the world. He chose to call Corona, Queens home, but when he left his home, he was a citizen of the world. So when he sings What a Wonderful World, he could vouch for it. You can name a million great instrumentalists. You can name a million great vocalists. Louis Armstrong's the only person you could find. He completely changed the way people played music on their instruments. So whether it's Charlie Parker on the saxophone, Jimi Hendrix on the guitar, they're all kind of coming out of Louis Armstrong's improvisational concept. But then he also completely changes the way everybody sings. So not just jazz, but the whole history of American pop music singing, going into R&B, soul, even hip hop. The rhythm, swing, everything is coming back from Louis Armstrong. So for one guy to influence basically everything that followed, he's the man.
I love you. I hear babies cry.